right?
No.
I'm hyper paranoid, but yeah, there's totally something there.
Welcome to the Compliant AF podcast, where healthcare compliance isn't just a checklist, it's a competitive advantage.
I'm Amy Wood, CEO of Copperpenny Consulting, a cybersecurity and HIPAA compliance geek who thinks encryption is awesome.
And I'm Kelley, CEO of Clinical HR, fractional HR business partner and HR nerd who is weirdly passionate about employment policy.
If you're a dental or healthcare leader who's tired of check-the-box compliance and wants to actually understand what the rules are and how to build a practice that doesn't live in fear of audits or lawsuits,
you are in the right place. We are digging into the stuff that keeps practice leaders up at night.
We'll break down the boring, call out the BS, and share real strategies with a little snark and a whole lot of caffeine.
This isn't legal advice. We are not your lawyers.
We are two consultants who have seen way too many practices get in trouble because no one explained the rules in a way that actually made sense or made them care.
But since this is a compliance podcast, the content in this podcast or any associated clips is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, medical, tax, or regulatory advice. We are not attorneys. Clinical HR LLC and Copperpenny Consulting LLC are not legal firms, and listening to this podcast does not create a client relationship. Always consult a qualified professional advisor for guidance specific to your situation.
So buckle up, because boring compliance just got compliant AF.
And we're back. Amy, what a year. 2025 closing out, starting into 2026. We have got checklists like nobody's business for you. All of the things that we need to do to update compliance at the end of a year. 2026 is making that even worse for some practices. So let's go ahead and kick off this episode. I'm going to let you go ahead and start with your number one. What is your number one HIPAA and cybersecurity compliance tip that dental practices, medical practices should be working on at the end of this year?
My first tip is going to be reviewing your policies and procedures for HIPAA, not your general employment manual. I'm sure you've got things in that arena, Kara.
That's my number one too.
No. Well, mine is more, update your policies or take a look at them, because I'm willing to bet that you probably don't have any policies on use of AI or vendors that are using AI. And honestly, a lot of them are using AI and you might not even know.
And if you haven't heard that episode, you should go back to our episode 105, where Amy and I talked about all things AI and vendors, because we deep dive on that one. But you know what? My number one tip too, as far as checklists and things that you should be doing compliance related in HR world at the end of any year, hopefully at the end of the year, if not definitely the beginning of the next year, is to update your policies. There are a lot of states that kick off state law changes January 1st. I know we have had a lot in the past year that have gone, July 1st, September 1st, but January 1st is still very traditional time for us to have new changes when it comes to employment regulations. There's like 23 or so states that have got some updated changes that are kicking off January 1st of 2026. And so if you have not already taken a look of that and done some kind of a compliance scan that for things that apply to your practice, that's 100% number one where I would start, because there's usually a little bit of a grace period when something rolls out. But if you don't have that updated, within a couple of months after, or at least you're not actually doing the thing you should be doing within a couple of months after, that can certainly start to become an issue, especially now that social media is such a widely used resource for so many employees. Even if you aren't sharing that information with them, they're probably going to hear about it somewhere, and that starts to become a problem. I'm sure you see that as well in HIPAA world.
All the time. I see it more in the OSHA space.
Okay.
But where, there's enough people that know enough about OSHA and infection control that they're seeing the things that aren't being done correctly, but I see stuff all over social media. I see stuff in the news. I saw one not too long ago where someone was throwing away charts in the dumpster of the office complex, and that was their disposal method. And I'm like, oh, no, we're not doing that. That's a terrible idea.
Well, and that's not anything new for 2026.
No.
Especially if you've just recently purchased a practice or started a practice, the things that have been done in the past aren't necessarily the things that should be being done right now. So 100%, I would take a look at your policies and procedures manuals, both from the HIPAA side, even your SOPs. I know this is a good time when everyone's out for the holiday season, taking some downtime. It might be a good time to review some of those things, to where you can conduct your all hands on meeting in January and get everybody on board with whatever your new policies are. Just make sure that you're definitely taking a look at anything that's regulatory that is changing for the new year. That seems like it should be one of those duh kind of policies. Like everybody, of course, knows that. And here we are. You think that
Yeah.
everyone knows
Well,
that. We've both got stories.
just because they know it doesn't mean they're doing it.
What?
And
No.
and we want you to do it.
It sounds like one of those things that I
So
have to repeat every single year. And yet every single year I'm finding clients that are not following the policies and procedures that are part of federal law. I literally was talking to a client this last week. And this is somebody who's bought her practice several years ago, like prior to the pandemic in the 20 teens, and thought that things had been going well. We got to the section of the handbook where we're talking about I-9s, and she's like, yeah, we're doing those. And I said, are you doing this? Are you bringing, the documentation to the office? Are you making sure that you're not specifying what documentation they're supposed to bring? Are you using the correct form with the correct date that's not expired? And she's like, so she was literally like in her office going through her files while we were talking, and she's like, oh, actually, the person I just brought on signed one from 2022. And I'm like, yeah, so let me send you my I-9 internal audit checklist and other resources for that, because I think you're going to be busy over the holidays.
whoops.
Yep. And so little things like that you think you're doing things correctly because you are filling out the form and you're even having them bring their documentation in, but it's not the right form and it's not the right timeline or whatever the case may be. There's always something. So even if you've been in practice for a long time and think you've got it covered, over the next couple of weeks when everyone's got some downtime, might be time to do a little bit of a
Just
system
check.
audit. Speaking of auditing, my second one is auditing your payroll, auditing classification, wage and hour practices. And that's another thing that if you have not been paying people properly at the end of a year when you're going to be doing those closeout reports, it's a good time to correct things prior to those reports getting filed. So that may mean that you have to go back and do some quarterly adjustments. It may mean that you have to adjust what you would be doing for your annual. It may mean that W-2s get adjusted. But I'd rather you see that happen now in December than in January or February or whatever time after those reports got filed. Then you have to go back and do an amended, and that sounds like lots of extra work. So
No, thank you.
give yourself some time and do it now.
Well, ironically, my number 2, and we did not plan this at all, but my number 2 is assessments too. Um, you know, risk analysis is one of those things that's required under HIPAA along with the security risk assessment as part of it.
How often is that
And
supposed to be done?
it's supposed to be done annually or whenever you make major changes. And hopefully all of you updated your Windows 11 by now. That would have been a major change that should have triggered some kind of at least gap analysis documentation.
So that's my HR brain works whenever I say things like that. So what is defined as a major change?
Right. So usually it's office move, major hardware or software change, change out of a key team member like an office manager or an owner.
So if they change their PMS, their practice management system platform, does that count as a major change that they should be doing?
Absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people right now when they're going from a on-premise server-based system to a cloud platform, that's an entirely different beast, and it has an entirely different risk profile. Because you're taking something that's in your care, custody, and control in your office, and you're giving all of that that physical security, technology security, access, all of that to
What about like
a
changing
vendor.
phones or something that
Yep.
doesn't seem like that's considered a major change? Oh,
It could be, yeah, because if you're going from an analog phone system to a internet-based VoIP system, and does that VoIP system have AI integrated into it? Is it writing directly in and out of the chart? Are you doing a credit card system that is standalone, even if it's on a website? Or is it integrating with your practice management to write directly to the ledger? Like it spins out of control really fast, and most people still think that all of this with a risk analysis is yes, no check boxes, and It's
Okay.
not that anymore.
See, I love it when I learn something new. This is literally like, this is what happens every time we get on the phone together. That's why we hit record on these things now. So, okay. So anytime they're making a major change, and I'm asking this even for like a personal note, because whenever I'm talking to clients who are making these types of changes, sometimes it is, hey, we're implementing new policies with our handbook, and this is the other things we're doing. So like right now, end of a new 1 year and beginning of a new year, I imagine there's a lot of contracts that are closing out or having to renew, or they may be making changes at that point. If they are making what per your definition as a major change, what should they do? You conduct a risk assessment, kind of a broad thing. So like literally, what are the steps that they need to do for that?
Like before choosing a vendor, we can start there. So before you choose your vendor, I mean, loop a HIPAA consultant in if you're working with one. If you're not, you might want to, because it's infinitely more complex than it used to be. And
And this is
technology is
not
so
something that
intertwined.
those like out of the box HIPAA training platforms are doing for you
Generally,
necessarily.
yeah, no, because you can call them for questions, but for the most part, they're not going to go as in depth into what each vendor is doing for you and how the data is flowing in and out of your practice and what they have access to, and is that vendor uh, onshore or offshore? Do they have a cyber policy that's going to cover you when and if they screw up? I mean, it starts with having a business associate agreement, vetting your vendors, which I'm incredibly passionate about. I've been vetting vendors back in the days when they threatened to sue me simply for asking on behalf of my clients. And
See
now a lot
episode
of them,
105.
I know, that's why I'm called a fun hater.
Um, okay, so and I have a rabbit hole of questions
We're
now.
going off on a tangent here. Of course we
I
are.
know. I was like, hang on, we have a checklist with numbers and stuff, but we'll get back to that eventually.
Yeah.
This is our problem here.
But that
This is what we-
assessment, like, it's so important because what we were doing before, even when I first started this, we weren't integrating technology into it the way that we do today. It used to be very much, it was administrative. Do you have the right paperwork, the right forms, the right documentation? And do you have your physical security locked down? And then do you have, antivirus and backups? It was very simple and clear cut. And now there's so much technology involved in every aspect. And we have to remember that the law changed in 2013 with the omnibus rule
Mhm.
with HIPAA, where it tied privacy and security and tied all of that together, just kind of mushed it together and said all aspects of HIPAA are now intertwined and the vendors need to be held responsible. And I will say, there's a lot of chaos going on in DC these days. 2025 has been a year. And there's still, Office for Civil Rights is still pursuing investigations. And the last few have actually involved the third party vendors, the business associates that have been the reason, whether, negligence or ignorance or accident, for causing some of these incidents to happen. Some of them quite large.
So say that you have selected your vendor with this risk assessment, like what are the steps to take for a risk assessment? Is this like a checklist that you have? Is this a service that they can engage, or is this something they should be doing themselves? What do they need to know about actually conducting that risk assessment?
So I start with something totally free. Just message, DM me, go to my website, and just ask for 13 questions. Start asking your vendors or potential vendors, and like I do a way more in depth conversation with vendors. I have a much larger questionnaire, and vendors are actually starting to care, which is nice. Some still don't. You can't fix everyone, but overall, starting by asking those questions, making sure that your business associate agreement is dialed in, that you're not footing the bill if they screw up, that, they're not limiting it to what you paid them last month. That's a common one that I see. And check with an attorney if you really want to know. I'm not an attorney. I know how to read things, but like this is information that you can look at yourself. It's not legal advice. But yeah, that's where I would start. Then I would start asking very detailed questions, and if you're uncomfortable or unable to do that, I love asking vendors questions. And then when they do things like spell HIPAA wrong, I'm like, all right, buddy, here. um I know you're a sweet salesperson. I need your nerdiest nerd that knows all the ins and outs of all the things on how this works and what you're accessing with these practices, because doctors, you guys are entrusting these vendors with all of your patient information, and your patients are entrusting you with all their health history information, the medications that they take, the insurance information they're giving you, all the other identifiers about them as a person. And it turns into a big old shit show. Oh, I finally said a real swear word on the podcast.
We have to actually bleep something.
That's okay. But it is, and I know firsthand because I've dealt with identity theft because someone didn't value an X-ray that had my name, birthday, social security number, and insurance number on it, and I still deal with stuff. So, like, I guess for me, it's a huge passion project because I don't want people to do that. But to really answer your question there, I do that as a service for my clients because it needs to be done and they don't know what to do. So,
But it is something they can technically do internally if they
yeah,
want.
yeah,
They need to have that checklist and are asking those correct questions for the vendors to be able
yeah,
to assess that. Okay. And so let's say that
absolutely.
anytime that there's a major change, and actually something else you had mentioned, and when you talked about offshore versus onshore, from the HR perspective, a lot of what has changed now has been kind of the shift to using some remote workers or employees who were working for the practice on site are working remotely. Some of them have moved out of state. That's another thing when I'm talking about like assessing wage and hour and making sure people are being paid correctly and making sure that you're following things the way that you should. If you're paying a worker directly and they're working for you, sometimes I am seeing practices that just say, well, because you're not working in the office, I'm going to make you a 1099 contractor. Or I'm going to follow the rules of the state where we are because this is where we're headquartered. And that's not correct. We're going to have an
Yeah.
episode coming up on multi-state compliance whenever we have like multi-location practices that cross states. But a lot of what I see too, mistakes that are being made is that maybe it's an office manager that's moving, because their spouse is moving or they want to be closer to a parent or whatever the reason. And
I
they're now,
moved.
you moved. Yes.
Deanna moved.
Yes.
She was
And
in
they're,
Texas when she started with me, and now she's in Minneapolis. And
yep.
I moved from California to Iowa, and like very different.
Yep. And they're state tax compliant, employment laws, sick leave laws. There's new ones that are coming out every year, and it's things you have to stay on top of if you're dealing with somebody who is working out of state. Now, if you're engaging a company that's like a virtual assistant company, if you're paying the company directly, that tends to be on them. But again, you still want to verify and make sure that you are paying people properly when
And
they're
that's
not.
another episode that will be forthcoming because not all virtual assistant companies are all onshore, and some of them that list their team members or assistants as contractors, those people do not have their own real business. They don't have insurance. So, like with HIPAA, the chain of custody is supposed to be doctor's the covered entity. You engage a virtual assistant company, let's say, and you have a business associate agreement with them. They're a US based company, but some of their team members or their contractors, as they've listed them, don't have, a real business. They're just they got listed as a 1099 because that's the way the company did it. And, it gets really, what's the right word I want to use here? It gets really
Sticky, messy.
discombobulated.
Yes, there
Is
we go.
that,
That's a
that a
good
good
one.
word here?
Yeah,
Yeah. Funky,
yeah.
funky dunky,
Screwed up,
weird.
not compliant AF.
Right. Not compliant AF. But yeah, I mean, we could go into that for hours.
Oh, no, for sure. So getting back to our checklist of our 5 things for HR and HIPAA that you should be doing at the end of a year, you actually mentioned 1099. So that's one of the things that I would have on my HR checklist for you to work with your CPA or accounting firm on is making sure your end of year payroll tax filings are completed, making sure that you have your W-9s appropriately for contractors, making sure you have your W-4s appropriately for your employees, everybody classified correctly, and then also that they're ready for W-2 season. Because we all know January 2nd rolls around and people are like, where's my tax refund? Making sure you are prepared for that season. I have spent a number of years working at a dental CPA firm. I know how that goes down. I have been the wrangler of the 1099, the wrangler of the W-9s, and all of the documentation you need from your vendors. making sure you are paying those people correctly and that you are appropriately providing the correct tax forms. You've got till January 31st to get those out before you end up with penalties and other issues there. So that for me is like, get yourself ready for that season and make sure that you are already on top of collecting that information. I know I get them throughout the year with some of my clients that are like, hey, my accountant needs a W-9. And I am 100% always impressed by that and ready to send mine because I'm like, that person's on top of it. I
Yep.
like you. Here you go.
I fill one out with the date, January 1st, and for that year, and it's just good to go. Anybody on my team can send that out whenever it's requested, and they don't need me to fill it out every single time. It's so nice. I started that years ago. A friend of mine in IT told me about that, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And you don't have to do the work over and over again.
Well, and I will say that if you are a independent contractor, if you are maybe a doctor who is an independent contractor working with other practices, or if you are temping and for whatever reason you're classified one way or another, properly or otherwise, if you are somebody who should be receiving 1099s, if you've moved in the last year, make sure you've updated your W-9 and you have a correct information document. And if you're an employee, if you're listening to this, make sure any addresses have been updated correctly. Any changes that you need to make for your W-4 have been done so that you are getting that appropriate form when you're supposed to get it and not delayed later through the U.S. Postal Service, which is special, super efficient, right? Absolutely
Well,
efficient.
my number 3 is interestingly about starting and stopping work at an office. So when you have a new team member that comes in, per HIPAA, they need to be trained before they're granted access to systems containing protected health information. It doesn't have to be a long training. It can just be like, hey, we do things this way in our office so that you don't come to this new job in our awesome office with all your bad habits from the office you used to work at. And when those people are no longer there, one thing I see a lot is that they're still listed inside systems. So it could be an insurance company login. It could be social media that they're still listed as a content contributor. It could be a practice management system they had a user. Just kind of go through during the downtime, whether it's between the holidays or when it slows down a bit and end of January, just start going through those systems, do a quick audit and remove access to anything that you might have missed throughout the year.
But Amy, what about temps who are needed same day? They don't have
The temp
time to do a
agency should be training them.
they don't have time to do a HIPAA training before they have to get on the schedule.
The temp agency should, well, I do it in 10 minutes. I have it pre-recorded based on, are you a clinical team member or are you a admin team member? Because HIPAA varies wildly between those job roles. And like everyone can spare 10 minutes if it needs to be done in the office.
So what should a compliant AF office be doing with their temps regarding HIPAA? If it's a new temp coming on and hasn't worked for your practice, like what would be the process for that?
I wouldn't so as far as logging into practice management, have a temp user.
Okay.
It makes it really easy because you can modify access to what they can see and do. So if say you have a clinical temp person coming in, like Deanna, excellent example. She still temps periodically as a hygienist. Theoretically, she would walk into an office, they would have a temp user, they would log in for her, and she would only have access to the clinical parts of the chart. She wouldn't have access to the financial areas or insurance areas. She would just be able to do her job, which is role-based access.
And what about the training? Should you have them come in a little bit early and do that 10-minute pre-recorded training so that you can check the box and say you did it?
You should. But if you're engaging with a temp agency and you're not going like off the script and finding someone on, I don't know, Facebook Marketplace. I don't know. Like where do you find temps like that?
Facebook group?
Craigslist?
No, Facebook groups. They're in Facebook groups.
Facebook groups.
There are other platforms that they connect with temps on.
Yeah, I mean, but the right way to do that is through a temp agency, and real temp agencies will actually train their people.
That's probably going to be an entire episode for us at some point.
Oh, yeah, I think we should.
Compliant AF temps.
Stay tuned. We'll be back with that one.
on the 2026 list. Actually, if there are anything that like any of you listeners that want to hear a specific topic, please email the show and we would be more than happy to do a particular episode on whatever your question is, or whatever topic you want to hear. Because we get these questions all the time, and it's so funny. Like we go through our week and we see all of these things that we could totally talk about, and we get to actually recording something. We're like, what were all those things again? There's just so many. So seriously, if there is a topic that you want to hear, we are more than happy to do that. Please just reach out. The contact information is in the show notes.
All right. What's number 4 for you?
Number 4, we talked a little bit about it earlier as far as I-9 documentation, but number 4 for me is reviewing your onboarding documentation kind of as a whole. I-9s are definitely one piece of it. You do want to make sure that you are using the most updated form. If you are still using paper forms, making sure that your process is correct with onboarding. If you are allowing your payroll company or your CPA or accounting firm or payroll processor to handle a lot of that onboarding setup, there's definitely some things that you want to make sure that they are doing properly and that you're doing your side of it. With the onboarding paperwork, though, just as a whole, I'm still seeing onboarding packets that are a Word document that was created in 2003 or something. And it's like, here's a list of things we want you to do. And a lot of those things have changed. You also want to look at whenever you're onboarding somebody to make sure that there aren't any changes from a compliance standpoint for your state. And so an example of this is if your state has recently updated their ban the box law. There are some laws in states regarding background checks and asking about criminal history. Some states have these laws, some states don't. Some cities have them or counties when the state may not be a ban the box state. And you have a variance of what point in that process you can ask about criminal history. So some say that, it can't be on the application. That's where it's called ban the box that you check that says that you do or do not have a criminal history. So they're banning that box and not allowing you to ask that question. Sometimes it is, just that it can't be on the application that you could ask after the first interview. Sometimes it's at the offer letter stage. And so you really need to be familiar with your state. And also, if you're using a recruiting agency, make sure that they are familiar. And I work in HR world. And so I've talked to a number of recruiters. Not every recruiter pays attention to every single state or city ordinance when they're hiring. So if you are using a recruiter, I would highly recommend you using one that's reputable and ask them that question. Are they familiar with the ban the box laws in your area where your practice is located? Because if you've got somebody else hiring for you and they're using a standard application that asks those questions and you're not allowed to, the onus of that falls on you. The person who pays that penalty is you. So make sure that you're paying attention to any of those little updates that come with your onboarding, and make sure that your entire onboarding process is going to be compliant for 2026 for your practice in your state, in your city.
Yikes. Nothing like making it overly complex.
Yeah, I know. HR ruins everything.
Well, we both do. Compliance in general with all things safety regulation and compliance. It's just, it needs to be done for a reason, though. There's always a method to the madness. There's always a reason for every little thing that changes. So
there is. And it's usually because it's been used against somebody for something at some point in history. And ban the box laws, often called second chance hiring laws, you'll see a lot of companies that have had if you have anything on your criminal history whatsoever, you are not able to get employment here. And that isn't always something that we want to have as a policy. It's actually best practices is a terrible policy to have some kind of if it's anything anywhere. That's part of the issue that we're seeing with certain people. They've gone and they've served their time, they've been rehabilitated, they're back in society, they're trying to be contributing valuable members of society. And sometimes people get charged with things that are not they're not something that should preclude them from ever getting a job ever again, right?
Mhm.
And so again, in a future episode, and I've already talked about this a couple of times, but in a future episode, I definitely want to bring on a background check expert who's going to talk a lot more about this. And so I won't dive too deep into it. I just want to kind of say that is my number 4 of reviewing your onboarding documentation and making sure those types of laws are being followed specific to your situation. Not something that is, this other practice gave me this onboarding packet and they said it's fine. It works for them. Their attorney approved it. Well, that's great. That approved it for their practice in their state at that point in time. Mm-hmm. State laws change year to year. Like I said, there's 23 or so states that are changing laws at this point. So things
I have the same thing too with HIPAA, with data breach notification is different in every state. Federal says I have 60 days to notify patients and government agencies, or up to. But in certain states, I've got some that are 5 days, some that are 15 days, some that are 45 days, and it's every state is just a little bit different. So it's not just HR.
Well, and the other thing I look at about new hires is some states are changing things like their sick leave mandates. We have a couple of states that are starting to expand into paid leave for all workers. We have a lot of states that have not had a sick leave mandate that are bringing something in or bringing in paid family leave. I'm still seeing practices that are operating from like the 20 teens with their policies where they'll say, well, employees, don't get PTO until they've been there for 6 months. Well, your state says otherwise. They're allowed to accrue immediately upon hire. You can tell them they can't use it for 90 days, but they're allowed to accrue immediately upon hire in one particular case that I can think of off the top of my head. There may be some changes when it comes to sick leave mandates. And so any of your onboarding policies, any of your new hire policies, your probationary periods, if you want to call them that, which if anybody's ever talked to me, I hate that term, but if you have some kind of introductory period, you want to make sure that you are compliant there because there's a lot of changes that have occurred in the last couple of years. And if you're not providing any mandated leave, if you're not providing mandated notices, those are things that you want to reevaluate with your onboarding processes when you're taking a look at what to do for 2026.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just in general.
Other things that you may want to look for with upcoming new years when you're talking about updating things for new hires, some of it's not for new hires, it's for everybody. The number of practices that I talk to and I ask them, hey, you're buying a practice, go and check that poster, that workplace rights poster in the break room. Is it in the break room? Should be in the break room. It's supposed to be somewhere that's absolutely visible. So a conspicuous location, not tucked in a closet behind a door, rolled up behind the office manager's desk. It needs to actually be posted in a conspicuous, you laugh, but I've seen it. It needs to be in a conspicuous.
Oh no, I'm just laughing because I've had the same thing happen with HIPAA notices, and I found one in the restroom when I had said during the class, I said, it needs to be posted conspicuously somewhere that anybody can see it, and they thought the bathroom was a great way, and I'm like, not everybody goes to the restroom, but everyone comes through your waiting room, and they're like, but it will ruin the decor. And I'm like, I get it. What color do you want the poster? I'll design it for you. Like, stop whining.
And there are plenty of places to get these posters for free. If you don't want to try to track one of those places down, you can go get it on Amazon for like $25, $30, something like that. Like it's not hard to find these posters, but make sure yours says 2026 in 2026. If you're listening to this in 2027, make sure it says 2027. I've literally found some though that I will talk to a doctor who's buying a practice and I'll say, go check this. And the poster is at least 10 years old. Like they've not updated it in a decade or more. So make sure that you're on top of your workplace posters, make sure you're on top of your notices, all of those things that go with bringing on somebody as a new hire, but also just in general, these are ongoing compliance obligations that employers have.
Yeah.
So what is your number 4?
My number 4 is passwords. We love them, but we hate them. The end of year is a great time.
On my to-do list.
I know. This is usually with offices I've been working with for a long time. This ends up being one of the only homework items for them because we've gotten everything else pretty dialed in. They communicate with us on and off throughout the year, when they're making changes or thinking about changes. And so, like we're part of the team and just, outsourced, fractional. That's the right word, fractional. But with passwords, the current recommendation is 8 to 12 characters, upper and lowercase, at least one symbol. Please don't let it be password 1 exclamation.
Employees
Utilizing real
1, 2, 3.
password managers, not Chrome, is an excellent idea. I have heard 2 stories recently at the end of 2025 where Google accounts had been logged in personally at work, which first is a big no-no and should be in your policies and procedures and trained on. But when you sometimes log into your personal, it will ask a question of, do you want to merge these accounts? And we're so in a habit of clicking yes and next and install.
Everything without reading.
Yeah. Every time I download a game on my phone, it asks me to log into my work email as a pop-up. Right?
No.
I'm hyper paranoid, but yeah, there's totally something there. And it's, real password managers are not going to be Chrome. I know that's easy and it's free, but it's meant for home use. It's not meant for business purposes. And the password recommendations are nothing that you use at home should be used at work. It should not be a phone number, address, birth dates, kids, significant
Should the
others,
employer set the password or the
pets.
employee?
The employee should set the password. When I was doing IT, we never knew what the passwords were. We would just send a password reset link. With password managers, like I have one now with my team, we have separation. So I have my passwords that only I can see as an owner, shared passwords with my executive assistant. I have, things that I share with my fellow consultants. And it's better to compartmentalize that. And then if one person leaves, then we just deactivate the shared access and any passwords that they had just them.
And that's why I use something like LastPass whenever I'm working like with my assistant. I
Yep.
don't give her any passwords. I just say, here's the LastPass, and she doesn't have access to anything here.
Yeah. And we're not endorsing any one provider. It just happens to be what we both use. And there's a lot of others. I mean, there's even some IT providers that offer one as part of their services. So all I'm saying is just use something that's professional, that should be used, that can have clear separation. And if it's anything that's used in any of your personal accounts, don't recycle or reuse it. It's it's just not worth it. And I've had people, the most interesting password I ever had, I said it as a joke once. You can have your password be I hate HIPAA, Amy is mean, teeth are awesome with numbers and characters after it. And I had a doctor that said, I hate Amy. And I was like, that was not one of the options. It was, I hate HIPAA, Amy is mean, not those two
I know.
together.
You know, the little camera cover that you gave me for my phone, I called it my Damn It Amy for the longest time because every time I went to take a selfie, it was on and the screen was black. And I'd be like, wait, what's wrong with my, oh, damn it, Amy. Had to uncover my camera. So that was, I mean, I understand their feelings, truly.
And I get it. But like, I'm just trying to help people. I don't
I
want people to get in
know.
trouble, and I don't want them to call me for data breaches. So password updates, definitely within practice management system.
Would you recommend like a New Year's refresh where like you log everybody out of all devices, everybody resets passwords, let's start new year, new you, new password?
I mean, yeah, it's a giant pain in the butt. I mean, I have access to a lot of different things, and it can take me up to a full workday to change all of my passwords.
So that would be the
So
other thing
that's,
I would say to that from an HR perspective, give them time to do it. Like if you really want
yeah,
them to have that security, don't just shove that on their plate and hope that they can also get their like have a day or a half day or a something where y'all are doing all of this. And that's not a production time. That's a let's be compliant time and focus on this if you possibly can. Or at the very least, don't try to have them do it like, in the 10 minutes before they log in for the day. Like you shouldn't be having them work off the clock. That's considered work time. So make sure you're making time for them to do it.
that sounds like a no-no.
Just saying. All right, last thing. What is your number 5 pro tip things they should be doing for a new year?
This is actually coming back from my old IT days. Run a test restore of your backups. And what I have found is that when you're trying to do a year end anything, it could be doing all your month ends within the practice management system and doing the reconciliations for your year end as well. Running a backup is always a good idea because what if something is super effed up in there, and then we want to make sure that we have a backup that has whatever that data was before. And a lot of backup systems have the capability of doing a test restore as if something were broken and you had to restore from those backups. That's actually a HIPAA requirement, has been for quite a long time. And I know, like 3 presidents ago. And it's, I mean, I'm like trying to think of the year and I'm like, it was like 3 presidents ago, right?
Oh my god, we're getting old.
Oh, don't say that. We're not. I am an elder millennial.
We are experienced or something like
Wizened.
wizened.
Wizened. Who's the comedian Eliza Schlesinger
We
had
are
said,
wizened
gather around the
age.
Snapchat. Well, I tell you the story of the dial-up phone or dial-up internet or rotary phone or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and watch that clip at this point. No, I'll tell you
Yeah.
the tale of the landline. That's what it was.
Yes.
That's what it was.
Yes.
Gather around the Snapchat children while I tell you the tale of the landline.
Oh, it was interesting. But yeah, the backup, there are still some systems out there that are DIY'd by offices or even sometimes some not as experienced IT providers that if you break the system in order to do the restore and it doesn't work, then you just break your system. Good backups. There's lots of systems out there that are completely affordable at this point. They're not cheap, but they're affordable and appropriate that you can run a test restore without actually breaking your whole system to test it.
Smart.
So,
Very
yeah,
smart.
because you don't know if it's going to work when you actually need it.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, my number 5 would be confirming compliance for benefits and trainings. So this kind of piggybacks on what you're wanting them to do for, making sure that they're on top of their HIPAA training, making sure they're on top of their OSHA training. Get your calendars out in January and plan out your trainings for the year. Plan out what your open enrollment is for benefits and get that communicated to your team. It doesn't help anybody whenever it's buried in the back of your head or stuck in your office manager's head or whoever is the one that's in charge of planning all of these things. Get all of that out starting in January to where everybody is on the same page. This also helps with things like budgeting, for example. We always hear, "Oh my goodness, we don't have time. We don't have the budget for this. We don't have budget for trainings. We don't have the budget to keep the team on top of things." In January, plan out, okay, we need to do our HIPAA training for this. We need to get our CPR done for this. We need to get our OSHA training done. Okay, our benefits are up on this date. We need to make sure our team is ready for open enrollment if we have health insurance. These are the people who are going to be eligible for a 1K. Let's make sure we get those things out to them in time. If we've got COBRA things that we need to update people on, all these notices, all of that needs to get planned out, I feel, in January. I also like to say things like, and this is less compliance per se, but definitely from an HR perspective, if you've got things like holidays in your handbook that say these are the holidays that we observe and we observe them on work days that would be a typically scheduled work day, if you don't pay them just flat out across the board for everybody, that's another thing that you may want to communicate early in the year. It's going to be our holiday calendar for this year. 4th of July is going to be on like Friday or Saturday or something. And so if you're not open and you're not going to pay for that, then make sure that they're aware that you're not observing that holiday this year so that you don't have that question that comes up the week before on social media every single year. You can tell I had to do this a couple of times this year.
I get it internally too. And I'm like,
Yes.
guys, like you guys know this stuff.
Put it on the calendar. These are the ones we're observing. These are the ones we're paying
Yeah.
for. Because from a compliance standpoint, you may not have to pay for holidays. It's not a mandatory requirement, state or federal otherwise, that you pay for them. But if you do take them and you put them in your handbook and you're saying we're paying for these holidays, you do need to make sure that you are actually following what's in your written policy, because a lot of states do have that from a compliance standpoint, that you need to follow what is your written policy. So if your policy says on days that are regularly scheduled and you're not going to pay for it, make sure that they know ahead of time and just go ahead and get that covered in your January team meeting or February team meeting, whatever you do first quarter to get ready for the year. So there isn't that question come Memorial Day if y'all don't typically work Mondays, or Thanksgiving if you don't typically work Thursdays, but you also take the Friday off to observe it, but that's technically not the holiday. So are we going to pay for it or not? Like all of those questions, get those answered and out of the way in January so that you can stay compliant with your trainings, with your holidays, with your policies. And that way you've got this clear communication with the rest of your team to make it a nice, easy 2026.
Because Lord knows we need it. It's been a little too chaotic this last year. And I think if we have all our ducks in a row instead of wandering all over like they have been lately, then Kara and I get a lot less frantic phone
We
calls.
get
And
to
that
do
would
the
be
fun
nice for
stuff.
everyone. I know we do enjoy doing fun stuff. Like I play games in some of my classes and I get to like do disaster drills and people have fun and bond better. And like I enjoy doing that. But it feels like this year in general has been almost as chaotic as that horrible year in 2020.
With
And
the
it's
amount of
just
swear words we've dropped in this episode, you can totally tell what time of the year it is and what kind of year it's been. So
Well, I was showing you my new Christmas ornament, my dumpster fire.
I
It's
love
it's
it.
fine. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
But
Totally
and it
fine.
is. It will be because, we're still here. We're putting out content. We're putting out new podcasts for you. And, we're trying to make sure that you guys and your offices and all the team members and the practices and the doctors and everybody that you're all compliant AF.